Maya stepped into the airport, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She carried a small suitcase and a handbag, her posture straight, her expression calm. The airport was crowded with people rushing in different directions, but Maya moved with quiet confidence. She reached the security checkpoint, where passengers were removing their shoes and placing their belongings in plastic trays. A tall, heavy-built officer named Jake stood near the scanner, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. He looked bored, but as soon as he noticed Maya, something changed in his expression. "Ma'am, step aside," Officer Jake ordered, his voice loud and firm. Maya frowned slightly but obeyed. She had traveled many times before, but something about Jake's tone made her uneasy. She placed her handbag on the counter and looked at the officer. "Is there a problem?" she asked politely. Jake smirked. "Just a random security check. Or do you think you're too important for that?" Maya remained calm. "I have no issue with security checks, officer." Jake didn't respond. Instead, he gestured toward her suitcase. "Open it." Maya sighed but complied. She unzipped her suitcase, revealing neatly folded clothes, a few accessories, and some books. Jake began poking through her belongings, taking his time, while the line behind her grew longer. "Is this necessary?" a man behind Maya asked. "She's holding up the line." Jake shot the man a glare. "Security checks take time. If you don't like it, you can wait somewhere else." Maya glanced at the passengers behind her, noticing their impatient expressions. She felt embarrassed, but kept her composure. "Are you done, officer?" she asked, hoping to move on. Jake chuckled. "Not so fast. What's in your handbag?" Maya handed it to him, trying not to let frustration show. Jake opened it and casually dumped the contents onto the counter. A few makeup items, a wallet, and a phone fell out. "Careful," Maya said, annoyed now. Jake grinned. "Relax, lady. Just doing my job." He picked up her wallet and opened it without asking. Maya's hands clenched into fists, but she stayed silent. Jake whistled. "Fancy credit cards. Must be nice to have all this money. Who's paying for your trip?" "A rich boyfriend." A few people nearby gasped at the comment. Maya's face hardened. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cold. Jake shrugged. "Just saying. Some people like to travel on other people's money." Maya took a deep breath. "I don't think that's any of your business, officer." Jake smirked. "Oh, so now you're upset. Relax, it's just a joke." Maya's patience was running out. "Are we done here?" Jake tossed her wallet back onto the counter. "Yeah, sure, you can go." Maya quickly gathered her things, her hands slightly shaking. The humiliation burned inside her, but she refused to show it. As she walked toward her gate, she took out her phone and made a call. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were filled with determination. "Hello, darling. I need you to handle something for me." Little did Jake know, his troubles were just beginning. Maya walked away from the security checkpoint, her face calm but her heart racing with anger. She had never been treated like that before, and she wasn't going to let it slide. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and dialed a number on her phone. The phone rang twice before a deep, confident voice answered. "Hello, my love. Everything okay?" Maya's expression softened for a moment. Her husband, Ryan Carter, always had a way of making her feel safe. But right now, she needed more than comfort. She needed action. "Ryan, I just had a terrible experience at the airport security checkpoint," she said, keeping her voice low but firm. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Ryan's tone changed. "What happened?" Maya quickly explained how Officer Jake had humiliated her, searched through her belongings without respect, and made insulting remarks. Ryan's voice was sharp now. "He mocked you. He disrespected you." Maya sighed. "Yes, and not just me. He was treating other passengers rudely too. He thinks he has all the power just because he wears a uniform." Ryan took a deep breath. That man has no idea who he just messed with. Maya smiled slightly. I thought you'd say that. Ryan wasn't just anyone. He was the owner of Carter Airlines, one of the biggest airline companies in the country. The very airport Maya was standing in had several flights operated by his company. He had influence, power, and most importantly, a strong sense of justice. Stay where you are, Ryan instructed. I'll make some calls. This officer is about to learn a very important lesson. Maya hung up and sat in a nearby lounge area. Her anger had settled, replaced by quiet satisfaction. She didn't believe in revenge, but she did believe in consequences. Meanwhile, at the security checkpoint, Officer Jake continued his usual behavior, barking orders at passengers and making unnecessary comments. He had already forgotten about Maya. To him, she was just another traveler who couldn't do anything about his authority. But then his radio crackled. Officer Jake, report to the supervisor's office immediately. Jake frowned. What? I'm in the middle of. Now. The serious tone of the command made his stomach tighten. Something wasn't right. Reluctantly, he turned and walked toward the office, unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down. Officer Jake walked into the supervisor's office, his confidence still intact. He had handled many passengers before. Some complained, but nothing ever happened. To him, this was just another routine scolding. Nothing serious. Inside the office, Mr. Collins, the airport security supervisor, sat behind his desk, looking tense. Another man stood beside him. A tall, well-dressed gentleman with sharp eyes and a commanding presence. Jake frowned. He didn't recognize the man, but something about him made the room feel heavier. You called for me, sir, Jake said, keeping his voice casual. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. Officer Jake, this is Mr. Ryan Carter. Jake blinked. Ryan Carter. Why did that name sound familiar? The man, Ryan, stepped forward, his gaze cold and unreadable. I own Carter Airlines, he said simply. Jake's stomach dropped. Carter Airlines. That was one of the biggest airline companies operating in this airport. And if this man was the owner. Ryan's eyes narrowed. And I hear you had an interesting interaction with my wife today. Jake swallowed hard. Told you wife. Ryan's jaw tightened. Maya Carter, the woman you humiliated, insulted, and treated like a criminal at your security checkpoint. Jake's confidence wavered. He had no idea Maya was connected to someone this powerful. Mr. Collins leaned forward, his expression serious. We have received a formal complaint, Jake, and this isn't just any passenger. Mr. Carter has a lot of influence here. Jake tried to find an excuse. Sir, I was just doing my job. Security checks are important, and I didn't mean to offend anyone. Ryan's lips curled into a slight smirk, but his eyes were still cold. Didn't mean to offend. You went through her personal belongings like she was a suspect. You made disgusting comments about how she could afford to travel. You treated her like she didn't belong. Jake stammered. I didn't know who she was. Ryan's expression darkened. So if she was just an ordinary woman, your behavior would be acceptable. Jake had no response. His heart was pounding now. Mr. Collins sighed. Jake, this is serious. We cannot allow security officers to abuse their power. There will be consequences. Jake felt sweat forming on his forehead. Sir, please, it was just a misunderstanding. Ryan crossed his arms. A misunderstanding? No, Officer Jake. This was arrogance. And now you're about to understand what real power looks like. Jake's hands trembled slightly. For the first time, he realized he was in real trouble. Officer Jake sat stiffly in the chair, his palms sweating. The air in the office felt thick with tension. He had always acted like he was untouchable. But now, sitting in front of Ryan Carter, he felt small. Ryan leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Jake. Tell me, Officer Jake, do you enjoy your job? Jake cleared his throat. Yes, sir. I do. Ryan nodded slowly. Good. Because after today, You might not have it anymore. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Sir, please. Ryan raised a hand, cutting him off. Save it. You had no idea who my wife was, and that's exactly the problem. You think you can treat people however you want just because you wear a uniform. You mock them, humiliate them, and abuse your power. But today, you picked the wrong person. Jake shifted uncomfortably. His confidence was gone. He felt trapped. Mr. Collins sighed, shaking his head. Jake, this isn't the first complaint against you. We've had reports before, passengers saying you were rude, disrespectful, even aggressive. But today, we have solid proof. Jake's stomach twisted. Proof. Ryan smirked. Yes. Maya recorded everything. Jake's face turned pale. She what? Ryan pulled out his phone, pressed play, and the office filled with Jake's own voice. Must be nice to have all this money. Who's paying for your trip? A rich boyfriend. The recording continued, capturing every word, every insult, every degrading comment. Jake's hands turned into fists. He wanted to say something, anything, but there was nothing left to defend. He had done exactly what the recording showed. Mr. Collins shook his head. Officer Jake, we cannot allow this kind of behavior in our airport. Effective immediately, you are suspended. Jake's heart pounded. Suspended? Sir, please. I need this job. Ryan's voice was calm but firm. You should have thought about that before disrespecting my wife. And who knows how many other passengers before her. Jake's breathing was heavy. His world was crashing down. Mr. Collins stood up. You may leave now, Officer Jake. Security will escort you out. Jake swallowed the lump in his throat. This wasn't just a small punishment. This was his entire career at risk. As he stood up, his legs felt weak. He had always believed he was untouchable. But today, karma had arrived in the form of Ryan Carter. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. Jake walked out of the office in a daze, his mind racing. His uniform, which once gave him authority, now felt like a weight pulling him down. He had been untouchable for so long, treating passengers however he pleased. But now, he was the one being humiliated. As he stepped back into the security checkpoint, he felt eyes on him. Other officers and airport staff whispered among themselves. News spread fast in places like this. Is it true? Officer Jake got suspended. Wow, never thought I'd see the day. Passengers who had been victims of his arrogance before now looked at him with satisfaction. Some smirked, others shook their heads. The same power he once misused was slipping away from him. Jake clenched his jaw. He refused to accept this. He stormed over to a fellow officer, Mark, one of the few colleagues he considered a friend. Mark, you gotta help me. This is all a misunderstanding. Jake hissed. Mark hesitated. Man, I heard the recording. There's no misunderstanding. Jake's face burned. Come on, it's just one passenger. Why is this happening over one complaint? Mark sighed. It's not just one complaint, Jake. People have been talking about you for a while. This was just the final blow. And besides, he lowered his voice. Did you even know who she was? Jake's stomach tightened. I didn't. But why does that matter? Mark gave him a pitying look. Because she wasn't just anyone. She's Maya Carter. And her husband basically owns half the flights in this airport. Jake swallowed hard. He already knew this, but hearing it again made it feel even worse. Just then, a voice spoke from behind him. Officer Jake, hand over your badge and radio. Jake turned around and saw two senior security officers standing there. One held out a hand, waiting for him to comply. Jake's hands trembled as he slowly unpinned his badge and placed it in the officer's palm. Then he handed over his radio. For the first time, he felt powerless. Passengers continued to watch as the officers escorted him away. Whispers filled the air. Jake had spent years treating others like they were beneath him. Now he was the one walking through the airport with his head down, feeling the weight of his own actions. And it was only the beginning of his regret. You said. 6. ChatGPT said. Part 6. The weight of regret. Jake stepped outside the airport, the cool air hitting his face like a slap. The doors slid shut behind him, sealing him out of the place where he once held power. His mind was spinning. How had everything fallen apart so fast? Just this morning, he was barking orders at passengers, making them feel small. Now, he was the one feeling invisible, just another man standing outside an airport, jobless and humiliated. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, hoping for good news, maybe a message from a friend offering support. Instead, it was a news alert. Security officer suspended after disrespecting airline owner's wife. His heart sank as he clicked on the article. His name wasn't mentioned, but the details were enough for anyone in the airport to know who it was. The comment section was already filling up with people talking about an arrogant officer getting what he deserved. Jake's hands shook. This wasn't just a suspension. This was public shame. A message popped up from Mark. Mark. Dude, it's everywhere. Even some airline staff are talking about it. You really messed up. Jake gritted his teeth and shoved his phone back into his pocket. He had worked here for years. Now, in a matter of hours, he had lost everything. His thoughts drifted back to Maya Carter. She had barely raised her voice. She hadn't argued or fought back. She had simply made a call, and his world had crashed. How many others had he treated the same way? How many people had walked away from his checkpoint feeling humiliated just because he thought he could? For the first time, a heavy realization sank in. This wasn't bad luck. This was karma. A gust of wind blew past him, and for the first time in years, Jake felt truly powerless. Jake sat on a bench outside the airport, staring at the ground. His mind was numb, replaying the events of the day over and over. He had never thought this could happen to him. He had always believed he was untouchable, that his badge gave him the right to treat people however he wanted. But today proved him wrong. As he sat in silence, he noticed people walking in and out of the airport. Some were rushing to catch their flights. Others were greeting loved ones with warm hugs. Life moved on, as if his downfall didn't matter. He was just another person now. No authority, no power, just regret. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was from an unknown number. Hesitantly, he answered. Hello. A familiar, calm voice spoke. Officer Jake. Jake's stomach twisted. It was Maya Carter. He hesitated. Mrs. Carter. Maya's voice was steady. I didn't call to humiliate you further. I just have one question. Was it worth it? Jake swallowed hard. He knew the answer. No, ma'am. It wasn't. Maya sighed. I hope you remember this moment. Because every passenger you disrespected before today probably felt the same way you do now. Jake closed his eyes. He had never thought about it like that before. He had spent years looking down on others, but now he finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. Maya continued, maybe this is your chance to change. Jake, you lost your job, but you still have time to fix yourself. Before he could respond, the call ended. Jake sat there for a long time, her words echoing in his mind. Maybe this wasn't just karma. Maybe it was a wake-up call. For the first time, Jake didn't feel anger or resentment. He felt something new, the desire to change.